Hey everybody, this is Dustin with www.gamblingonfreedom.com. I'm a certified hypnotherapist specializing in problem gambling, compulsive gambling, gambling addiction. And today's video, I want to talk to you a little bit more about the recovery side versus the addiction side. So a lot of my videos go into the addiction side and how gambling addiction gets created and how the habit loops form and how there's variable rates of change, and the casinos hijack that part of our brain that's already preconditioned to understand how games are played and how games work and just life in general. And so I talk a lot about the addiction side, how it gets created, all of that kind of stuff. But today I really want to talk about the recovery side. I really want to give you guys a little bit of understanding of how you can actually get out of the addiction instead of just understanding the addiction. Okay. Because there's ways to do this, and some of them are faster than others. Okay, you don't have to wait another year to get out of the gambling addiction. I think this is something that might create a little bit of resistance to someone who wants to quit gambling. If somebody is hearing that it's going to take a year or 6 months to get out of their gambling addiction, they might not feel like they can do that. There might not be a feeling of capability there to be able to withstand and use their willpower for 6 months or a year to get out of gambling. And so I really want to kind of break those myths down, because that's not how it works. You can stop gambling sooner rather than later. Okay. Um, what I really want to focus on today is an ecosystem, understanding how your life's ecosystem can help you get out of gambling addiction. Okay. Now, this is if you're going to do this on your own, you don't need someone to help you, right? Or if you want to do it on your own and you don't want anyone to help you, hopefully, this idea, this understanding of where you're at and how things are progressing for you, how this can actually work for you. Okay. Make it work for you. So, what do I mean by ecosystem? Well, what I mean is gambling isn't the problem, right? I've talked about this before. Gambling isn't the problem. It's the attempted solution to the problem. It's the thing that is giving you relief, excitement, fun, right? Joy. And these positive feelings are attached to positive thoughts, right? You have urges, you have cravings, and all of that really is just positive feelings and positive thoughts about doing the thing. It doesn't matter what it is. Okay. So if you have an addiction to gambling, then you're going to have positive thoughts towards gambling and you're going to have positive feelings towards gambling. That is what cravings are. That is what urges are. Now, especially in this case, as a hypnotherapist, I work with smokers and things like that, and there's a chemical component to that, and a lot of people get stuck on this idea that it's chemical, but the truth is, after about 48 hours, 72 hours or so, all the chemicals are out of the body anyway, and then it just becomes a mental craving versus a chemical craving. In this case, with gambling, there is no chemical craving. You can argue the dopamine part is the chemical part, but there's no added chemicals, right? It's not like with cigarettes or something. So really, you're just dealing with the dopamine and the mental craving part. And what I want you to understand is just a brief understanding of how hypnosis works in a way. Um, Understand that anything you have interest in hypnotizes you. Anything and everything you have interest in hypnotizes you. The more interested you are in anything, the more open you are and the more focused you are. The more open you are, the more focused you are, the more receptive you are, the more suggestible you are. The more suggestible you are, the more in hypnosis you are. Okay. So interest builds hypnosis. The more interest you have in anything, I don't care what it is, you are being hypnotized by that thing. Okay. So understanding it from that standpoint, think about your life. Do you have more interest in gambling than you do in your life? If so, it stands to reason that you'll be moving away from your life and towards gambling, because there's more interest, there's more fun, there's more excitement, there's more relief in the gambling than in your life. So what do we do? Well, one of the things we can do is start to build the ecosystem of your life to be fulfilled in all these different areas that they're not fulfilled in right now. Imagine if your life was so fulfilled that you had this very powerful ecosystem of happiness and excitement and fun and fulfillment within your life. You wouldn't need to gamble. In fact, you could probably even gamble and not care about it. I've had clients who uh, have tested themselves to be able to, after we've done the work, they've stopped gambling for several months. And now they're like, oh, well, I want to test how it would feel when I go gamble. And they go and they put in $20 or $40 online and they bet and they lose it all naturally. And then they stop. And instead of chasing their losses, they realize that they no longer need to gamble. They no longer need to bet. They could if they wanted to, but they don't have to. It doesn't fulfill them the same way anymore. The whole life is changed. The ecosystem of their life is now fulfilled. So, what is the ecosystem of your life? Well, I like to think of it as a whole life mastery. There's four pillars of whole life mastery, is the way that I like to think about it. So we have self, health, wealth, and relationships. If all four pillars are solid and in a foundational sense fulfilled, then the gambling no longer feels important. Okay. So what does that look like? So self, okay. How confident are you? How much belief do you have in yourself? What are your core values and do you uphold them? How are your emotions? Are they stable and positive or are they negative and erratic? Okay. Do you have compassion for yourself and others? Okay. So, what is the self? Self basically means that you are identifying with positive things, you believe in positive things, you have a strong understanding of who you are, of your values, of your core values, because there's a difference between values and core values. You have a strong understanding of your core values. You have a strong identity with being a non-gambler or, someone like that. You believe in yourself. You feel compassion towards yourself and others. You have positive emotional associations going towards yourself and life in general. Right. Then we have health, right? Your health pillar is literally that. So how is your nutrition? Is your nutrition on point? Do you have the weight that you want? Are you 50 pounds overweight or are you where you want to be? Do you look the way you want to look? Do you feel the way you want to feel? Do you have energy all throughout the day? Do you wake up? Is your sleep good and you wake up with energy? How is your sleep quality? Do you toss and turn every night or do you just fall right to sleep? Do you get 8 hours or do you get three? Okay. What about your wealth? What about your career? Are you making enough money to pay not just the bills, but also have money left over for a vacation? Do you have a career that you are fulfilled by? Do you like where you work? Or are you, not exactly where you thought you'd be 10 years ago? What about your relationships? Do you have meaningful connections with people, meaningful experiences with people? Do you have a significant other? Do you have love for your mom and dad and siblings? Are you feeling positive emotional associations when you connect with people, or do you have negative ones? Okay, so all of this, all of these pillars, if all of that was fulfilled, would you even need to gamble? Right? Probably not. So it's less about trying to build more resistance to gambling and more about understanding where your energy might go when you're not gambling. Right? If you no longer gambled, where would the energy go? What would you put it in? Okay. Now this gets tough because again, the more interest you have in something, the more hypnotized by that thing you are. So when you think of gambling, if you have a lot of interest in gambling, a lot of interest in sports, a lot of interest in money, right? You're going to be interested in all of those things and you're going to be almost compelled or propelled to go towards it. And that's okay because you can use that same energy to go towards something else. Okay, a lot of people, they're chasing their losses. They are chasing excitement. They're chasing money. They're chasing fulfillment. They want these feelings, right? It's an emotional issue, not a willpower issue. It's an emotional issue. This is why you can't just use willpower to quit. You know, if you've tried to stop gambling and you realize that you can't, that's probably when you're going to realize that willpower has little to do with this, right? If you haven't tried to stop gambling yet for real, and maybe you stopped for a month or two and you realize, oh, I could stop if I wanted to, right? Maybe you've tried that and you kept gambling because you really feel like you could stop. But the truth is that if you've been gambling for any substantial amount of time, like 6 months plus, you're probably addicted, which means that when you go to stop for real, never to gamble again, uh, that will be very hard. That'll be very difficult because you're actually addicted, right? And so you'll find that, you might tell yourself, I'm not going to gamble anymore. I promise myself I'm not going to. I'm going to give people my, finances, like my wife can hold my money and I'll let her hold on to that. And, I won't gamble. And so, and then you do, and then you break that promise and to yourself and her, and then it goes into that shame and guilt cycle that I talk about a lot on my channel. But my point is that your interest in the gambling is what's keeping you gambling. Okay. And it's hard to find interest in other things because that becomes the only source of relief in a lot of ways, the gambling. So we need to build an ecosystem of your life to where your life feels more fulfilling than the gambling does. And when it does, then you will no longer need to gamble. So this is sort of the recovery side. This is part of what we'll do uh, to help a client get out of the gambling addiction is really look at the part of their life that isn't going the way they want it to. And there might be several. There might be so many different things that are not going their way that they really want to improve upon, and all that pain is just going right into the gambling. Right? They're chasing the relief. It's why the gambling feels like the only thing that feels good, because other areas of their life are just unmanaged properly. And so think of it in that way. I want you to understand how your interest is building your addiction. Okay, your interest in gambling, in sports, in betting, in money, all in fun, in excitement, all of that is building the addiction stronger and stronger. So we want to look at what areas of your life don't have fulfillment. What areas of your life are not where you want them to be, and how come they don't? How come they're not where you want them to be? What's stopping you from creating that? And as we start to switch the focus from gambling into life and getting a fulfilled life, the interest in gambling just starts to fall off. So this is one of the ways that we can help people do that, to recover from gambling addiction. So let me ask you guys a question. If you didn't have your energy in gambling, if there was no energy in gambling, where would your energy go? Or where would it need to go? If you didn't have an interest in gambling, where would your energy go? That's a really good question. It's something you should answer for yourself, because whatever that answer is, when you look at it, if there's no interest in that thing, that's probably a sign that you're addicted. If you know exactly where your energy could and should go, but it doesn't feel like you want it there, that's a good sign you have that gambling addiction. You have that problem gambling. And you could be very high functioning. This is something I want to add. You could be very high functioning gambler, meaning that you have a career, you have a job, you have money coming in, you have a relationship, you have your life fulfilled in a lot of different areas, but maybe you haven't healed some things from the past. Okay, those things from the past could be really connected to your gambling and why you might chase your losses. I won't go into any names or anything like that, but for example, I had a client not too long ago who they lost about $150,000 last year alone. Okay, so they were very wealthy, and they had their life in order in a lot of ways. But they were losing lots of money, and they could recognize that they had a problem. And every time they tried to quit gambling, they were back at it 2 weeks later. And so they went through this issue for years. They, saw a therapist, they saw a counselor. They were, 2, 3 years into therapy, and eventually they, decided to work on it from the subconscious level and the emotional level instead. And within a session, just one. And I'm not going to say that this happens all the time. It might be one, it might be five, it might be 20. All right. Just understand that everybody's different. Everybody's going to come out of their addiction differently. All right. But I want you to understand that it can be faster than what you might think. I think one of the problems is that people, they see these programs and it's like, oh, 6 months to a year is like the standard of getting, recovery from gambling. And then that might, lower their desire to do it because they don't think they're capable. Right. And so it could happen in a session. This person had been gambling their whole life from like age 22 to 55. Okay, it's a long time to gamble, losing lots and lots and lots and lots of money every year. All right. So just think about this, for example. This person had a very unfortunate, traumatic event that happened when they were young. Okay. And that event that happened made them want to get back what they lost. Okay. They wanted to get back what they lost. They had an abuse of some kind. I'm not going to go into any details, but there was an abuse, and they were attempting to get back what they lost. So their whole life was sort of um, uh, managed in that way. They were, when they were going to school, when they were going to work, and all these things, they were doing certain behaviors and actions that they didn't want to do necessarily, that they felt were solutions to that problem at that time. Gambling just is now the newest form of that, right? So once this person hit around the age of 22, they found and discovered gambling, and then that became the solution to the life problems and the things that they hadn't healed, and the things that they're trying to get back. And that correlated right into chasing losses. It went right into it, associated right to it. So once we healed this stuff, chasing losses went away. There was no need. They didn't care. It wasn't important anymore because this was done. This was healed. This was fulfilled. All of the emotional needs were satisfied underneath the entire urge to go chase the loss. And so you don't have to stay stuck in this, guys. You can get out of it. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to be the case for everybody. It could just be something, closer to the time frame of when you started gambling. It could have nothing to do with childhood. It could have nothing to do with some kind of traumatic event. Okay. I think that's a misconception in therapy, is that everything is childhood trauma. No, that's not it. Okay. Anybody who tells you that everything is childhood trauma is either inexperienced or just wrong. Okay. I'm just going to tell you, it's not always childhood trauma. It could be literally 1 week before you started gambling, something happened that was big and it's connecting. Okay. It could be anything like that or anywhere in between. Right. So don't just think everything's childhood trauma. Don't just think everything is anxiety. No. Okay. No. So whatever the issue is, I can almost guarantee you that at some point the gambling is going to be more interesting than other components of your life. And as you heal the components of your life and you create an ecosystem where life itself is fulfilling in those 4 pillars: self, health, wealth, and relationships, especially, if you can connect and be fulfilled in all 4 of those areas, gambling will fall off. Okay. And we can do that together, or you can do that on your own. This is just some ideas to hopefully help you understand the recovery side of gambling addiction and what you might actually want to be focused on rather than the addiction itself. It's good to understand the addiction. It's good to understand how come the problem is there in the first place, and how the problem got created, and the shame and guilt cycles, and pain versus pleasure principles, and habit formation cycles, variable rates of change, the different components of creating the addiction. It's good to understand all of that, but it's also good to understand how the recovery works. What's actually going to happen with your life once you stop gambling? Once the urge to gamble is gone, once the interest in gambling is shut down a bit, and those interests are now in building your life back together. And that's what ultimately helps you maintain long lasting recovery. If you don't become fulfilled in your life, you will most likely go back to the gambling. Okay. So the recovery part is really more about building the ecosystem of your life, being fulfilled in all these different areas, learning how to adjust your interest in things, because interest is hypnosis. The more interest you have, the more hypnotized you are. So when you can focus and redirect your interest from gambling to working out or eating healthier or being with friends or making more money and saving it or whatever, and you start to create interest in these things, eventually that interest overtakes this interest and you stop gambling. That's one of the ways that we can help. So if you like this content, follow for more, subscribe. I'd be happy to hear from you guys. I answer all questions in the comments if it's a legitimate question, of course. And I'm happy to give the content. Hopefully, this helps someone, even if you aren't necessarily at a problem gambling stage. I want you to really understand what you might be getting into, even if you're a high functioning gambler, right? Even if you're a high functioning gambler and you have components of your life that are going well and your career is solid and your health is solid and your relationships are solid, um, there might still be things in the past that you haven't healed that could be contributing to why you gamble in the first place. And again, if you don't think you have an addiction, that's fine, right? If you're not addicted to gambling and you just do it for fun and maybe you do it every couple of weekends with your buddies or something like that, and you don't feel like there's a problem with it, by all means, continue to do you, right? This is for people who recognize there's a problem, and you really probably won't recognize there's a problem until you legitimately try to quit on your own. When you try to quit on your own and you recognize you can't, and it's been 6 months of you really trying and you still can't, that's probably when you start to recognize you do have a problem. So until you're there, do whatever you want to do. This isn't for you, right? This video is for people who really do want to come out of their gambling addiction, who recognize they have a problem, but they just can't see a way out and they don't know the components. And, so it's just a value video, hopefully to help someone who is really trying to get away from the gambling addiction. Anyway, hope this helped. Subscribe, follow if you like this content. I put out videos every week. And that's it. Take care for now, guys.